Hello designers, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can create your very own book cover for a fictional book in the public domain. That means that you guys are going to be designing a brand new book cover for a book that no longer has copyrights. Examples of this would be, for example, Huckleberry Finn, The Scarlet Letter, Peter Pan. All of those books were written in the 1800s, so the copyright for them has long expired. The idea behind your book cover is that you guys are going to create a book cover that would appeal to students like you. So you can see that while I was playing around with some of the different tools that we're going to be using in this tutorial, I created a fictional book cover by the amazing Elizabeth Abaya, best-selling author of The Absent Designer, with a brand new book cover for a fictional book called Hierarchy and Scale. And you can see how I was playing around with blending certain images on InDesign to create the look of a mask, such as I would create on Photoshop. And I was carrying over some of those graphics to the back cover and including typography to, of course, make it look official, and making sure that all of my formatting was consistent so that the book cover looked professional all around. So keep watching and I will show you guys how you guys can create your own unique book covers on Adobe InDesign. So here we're going to be designing the front cover for our historical fiction book. You guys are going to be selecting some kind of title from the selection that I gave you, books in the public domain. I'm adapting this tutorial from one that I found on tutsplus.com. So I'll be using the same measurements that they were using millimeters. Yes, you heard right, millimeters. So try to wrap your mind around the metric system. I'm going to select the print preset to start off with. And then I'm going to go and change the unit of measurement to millimeters. I'm going to change the name to book cover. And the width that they're asking me for is 130 millimeters with a height of 198 millimeters. We're going to leave our page set to 1 and we're going to scroll down and we're going to edit the margins and the bleed of our document. We want our margins to be a little bit thinner than they usually are. So I'm going to set them to 5 millimeters all around, and you guys will see that it's linked so that all of the margins for the top, bottom, inside, outside are going to change automatically. If I deselected the link button, I would have to manually input them. So I'm going to leave it selected. And then I'm going to be adding a bleed. The bleed is basically an extra margin that you put in for when you're going to print something and you want the color to exceed past the original margins of your document for trimming purposes. So the bleed is going to be 3 millimeters, and again it's linked, so each side is going to change automatically. Having done that, I'm now going to click create, and this is my document. Now this would be our front cover, but we're going to be designing the front, the spine, and the back cover. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to expand it. To expand this, I'm going to use my page tool. So you guys are familiar with the pages panel, but there's a pages tool that actually lets me go and expand the initial pages that I started off with. To make my life easier, though, I'm going to select my Essentials Classic workspace because it has a panel arrangement that I prefer. And now with the pages tool selected, which is the third from the top, I'm going to extend the page out to 276 millimeters in width. So you can see in my control bar it's changing the size, and I can also just input it here under width to 276 millimeters and it's going to change for me. So now this is going to be basically my back cover and my front cover on the right hand side. Now I need to create a guide that's going to let me know where the spine is going to be. So I'm going to drag a guide to about 138 millimeters. So altogether I adjusted it some, and my guide is falling at about 146 millimeters. You know what, I'm going to even it out and just put it at 146, and then one guide for 130 millimeters, just so I have like a thicker spine. It's not the most mathematically precise measurement in the world, but I am working with millimeters here, so that is totally throwing me off because I don't know the metric system. But I digress. So we're gonna go now, and we are going to drag a guide to about 65 millimeters, and that should be roughly about the middle of our back cover. And then I'm gonna go and drag a guide to roughly about the middle of our front cover, which I'm gonna set to about 205 millimeters, give or take. Again, these guides are just kind of like to help you out, but they are not written in stone, so you guys can always shift them around if you're mathematically able and you understand the metric system, unlike your teacher. That's fine. They're not going to show in your final document. They're just there to help you place content in a way that's going to be a little bit more organized. So that's pretty much my front and back covers, and now I'm ready to start working within my layers panel so that I can start adding some content to the front and back covers and make it illustrative. If your layers panel is not showing in this configuration of panels, you can always find it under Window and Layers. And we haven't really used InDesign layers that much. However, they are helpful when you're working with a lot of different graphic content and textual content, so that you can lock certain things in place so that they don't move. My first layer is going to be called graphics, and that's where I'm going to be adding the images that I'm going to be blending together for my front cover. I'm going to make sure that it is visible and it's not locked. So with my graphics layer selected, I'm going to start opening some of the images that I want to use on the front cover, and I'm going to blend them to create a kind of gradient mask effect like you would create on Photoshop. To start with, I'm just going to go and drag out some frames, and I'm going to align them to the edges of my front cover, which is going to be on the right hand side. The back cover will of course be on the left. I'm going to Control D to select both images and to place them in. The images will be enlarged, but you can just right click and select fitting and fill frame proportionally, and you'll be able to fit them as you wish. You know that if you double click on the image, you'll see like a red frame around it, which will let you reposition the image within the InDesign frame. What I want to do before I start fitting these images and before I start blending them together is I'm actually going to use my color theme tool so I can get some new swatches. You can see I clicked inside of the clouds and I got a lot of really nice swatches that I can now use to supplement the default swatches on InDesign. And to save these swatches, I'm just going to click add this theme to swatches, and I'm just going to verify that that was done. Perfect. So actually I did it twice. I'm going to delete that second theme then. And I'm going to do the exact same thing to the bottom image. So I'm going to scroll down with the color theme tool, click on that image, and it should give me a new set of themes for me to use. So I'm gonna go and save that to my swatches, and actually I can go and rename these so that they're easier for me to identify. So I might call this one clouds, and I might call the second theme grass or boys or whatever makes it easier for you to identify. This is totally extra, it's just gonna make it easier for me. I actually want to go and enlarge this image because I'm going to be doing some effects to it momentarily. Maybe send this one backwards. I'm going to select both images. I'm going to go to Objects, Effects, and Transparency. And I'm going to select a different blend mode so that I can blend the image of the boys into the image of the clouds. So I'm actually going to go and just select that one first, and I'll do each one at a time. Object, Effects, Transparency, and maybe I'll select Soft Light or multiply, whatever's going to help to blend the image of the clouds in. So this one does a fairly good job, I think. And you can always lower the opacity as well, depending on what you want. But I really want the silhouette of the boys with that cloud background, so I'm going to click OK. Let me actually go and place this image of the clouds on the top, and to do so I'm going to go to Object, Arrange, and Bring to Front. And with this image selected, I'm going to go to Object, Effects, and Gradient Feather so that I can create a sort of blend, if you will. I'll set it to about 90 degrees. And I want a little bit more black in this gradient feather. So you can see that gradually as I add more black into the gradient feather, I'm getting rid of that one edge of the bottom photograph and it's blending in so it just looks like one unique photo. And I'm really liking the effect that I'm producing here. So I'm going to click OK to save my changes thus far. Okay, having edited that blending of the two images, I will actually now select a brand new layer, and this layer I'm going to call it background color, because what I want to do is actually just add a color that's going to help to blend these two images together. So I'm going to select the rectangle tool, not the rectangular frame tool, mind you, the rectangle tool, because I just want a solid color. And I'm gonna again align it, and I'm going to select under one of the color themes that I had worked with earlier. So I might want to go maybe with a pink, maybe with one of the soft yellows in either one of the themes. And then once again I'm gonna go to Object and Effects and Transparency, and I'm gonna select a blend mode that will help to blend those two images together and just kind of give it one consistent color theme. If it doesn't work for you, don't select that blend mode. I'm just going to go and play around with the different blend modes that are available until I find one that is interesting to me. If you don't like it, don't use it. So I like the color burn blend mode. I'm just going to lower the opacity of that just a smidge to about 75%. And I'm also going to do a gradient feather for the image color as well. And once more for the gradient feather, I'm going to set it to about -90 degrees, and I'm going to add a little bit more black into it for a little bit more contrast. And then when you're happy, you can click OK to save your changes. Now that I'm done with the main background images, I want to go and create a separate layer, which I'm going to call my typography. And now I don't really want to move either of these two previous layers, so I'm going to lock them in place so that as I'm dragging the different typographic components, I'm not going and messing around with those too much. So I'm going to first drag out a frame right over here. I'm going to align it with that guide I had right about in the middle. And what I want to do is I want to actually insert a glyph that I'm going to be using as just a decorative symbol. To insert a glyph, I'm going to use the type tool and click inside that frame. And then with the type tool active, I'm going to go to Window, type in Tables, and then Glyphs. And if you're unfamiliar with glyphs, they are these symbols that you can add to any given project using typography. Such as, for example, if I was going to write the word niño, which uses the Spanish ñ, I wouldn't be able to find it if the rest of my work was in English. So I would go under the glyphs panel and start looking for the ñ within the glyphs so I could write the word properly. But I'm actually not interested in these special characters. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down, and as I scroll down I start getting slightly more decorative symbols. And what I want to do is actually want to use one of these decorative symbols to work as a sort of logo, if you will. And I'm actually going to go and select this one by double clicking it, and you can see when I double clicked it, it was added to my frame. And then I can just go and make it bigger by making the point size bigger, same as I would any other character. I'm gonna select white as my color for contrast, and maybe center it. I'm going to get rid of the glyphs panel, and then I would just edit that the same way I would any other piece of typography. If I decide later on it's not working for me, no big deal, I can always go and get rid of it. I don't know how I feel about it, but I think I'm just gonna stop playing around with the color too much, and I'm now gonna start adding my real text layers that are actually gonna be informative of the content of this fictional book. So I am going to use my frame tool, and I'm going to drag out a frame and then click inside it with my type tool, and this is going to be my author's name. So since I am doing Peter Pan, the author is James Barry, and I believe I'm spelling it correctly, but I will be double checking momentarily. I think I want to go and center that, and I'm going to select a font that I feel like it is distinctive to Peter Pan, or it reminds me of what I think of Peter Pan, but it's still legible. So in other words, I wouldn't select something like this that would look totally illegible on a book cover. I'm going to keep it pretty basic. This is optional, but underneath the author name you may want to include like a separate line. So I'm actually just going to go and copy this particular frame just to make my life easier, and you might want to put like, I don't know, best-selling author or something. And because we want to show at least 3 levels of hierarchy, you want to make sure you set it to a smaller type size so that there's a distinguishing factor between the author's name and the line underneath it. Alrighty, so I'm actually going to go and copy that again, just holding down Alt and dragging to duplicate it, and then this is of course going to be my actual title, and this is where I get to go all out with the text, which I'm going to place more towards the center of the actual work. And this is where I would go and select a more decorative font or a more decorative variation of this font, and I start playing around with the different effects that I can set to it to make it a little bit more stand out, because this would be like my first level in our typographic hierarchy for this book cover. Remember, you can always press W to preview your work thus far and make any necessary changes. Before I start formatting the text, I'm just going to go, since I figured out the sizes that I wanted, I'm going to select fit frame to content for each of these frames so that they're not necessarily overlapping and they're easier to select. And then I am probably going to be adding some kind of shape right about over here. So using my ellipse tool or possibly using my polygon tool, I'm going to be adding some kind of shape where I would put in a review or some kind of commentary giving you more information about that book. So this one might read Stupendous Classic. Remember, you're trying to make this as appealing to people of your age level as possible, so maybe use terminology that your peers would use. I really dislike the way that the text is just kind of like touching the sides of the ellipse like this. So with my paragraph panel active, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna just add a little bit more space before each of the lines and just kind of push it inward so it's not necessarily touching the sides of the ellipse, and it looks like it fits a little bit nicer like this. And then I probably will be bolding where it says Zabaya at times to make it look a little more different from the rest of the review. So I'm going to press W to preview the works thus far, and if there's something that you dislike or it's just not working for you, you know that you can get rid of it, move it around, change it up, whatever you need to do. I know I want Peter Pan to stand out above anything else, so I'm going to be using my effects panel yet again, going to object and effects, and I'm going to use a drop shadow effect to make it stand out a little more. Remember, every time you use drop shadows, subtle is better, so you may want to reduce your distance and increase the size so that it doesn't look like a very sharp shadow and it still casts a little bit of a shadow to make it look three-dimensional without it being over the top. I'm also going to be adding some effects like an outer glow, and I'm going to be adding possibly a stroke around it, a very soft stroke. But again, I want to keep it subtle. I don't want it to scream I have effects. I want it to just stand out in as tasteful a manner as possible. Remember to keep your typography consistent and not to use more than 2 fonts at a time, because you don't want it to look overwhelming and tacky. Okay, so that's how it looks like so far. When I put it in preview mode, I'm going to keep making some subtle changes to the typography, and I might go and change some of the colors being used in that background layer, but so far so good. Then once I make those changes, I'm going to start working on the spine and lastly my back cover. But you can see how it's coming together, and it really just has to be altered in some slight areas so that it feels like a pulled together image and not just a random collection of text on top of the edited image. So you can see I made some minor changes, and now I'm ready to start working on my spine, and I'm ready to start working on the back cover. Oh, one of the minor changes I made was it wasn't James Barry, it was J.M. Barry, and I wanted to be accurate, so double check, you guys, and make sure that the imagery that you guys select, of course, represents the theme of the book that you guys selected in some way or shape. It doesn't have to be accurate to the time period necessarily, but it should have something to do with the theme. So anyway, I'm going to open up my layers panel, and I'm going to actually unlock my background layer or my background color, and then I'm going to select it and extend it over to my spine because I want a little bit of color on my spine. And you know what? I'm actually going to unlock my graphics layer and maybe extend that picture of the clouds as well. Let me make sure that's selected. Oh, I see, because it's on top. I wasn't able to move it because the gradient was on top, so I just kind of had to shift it. So I'm just extending the clouds, and I'm extending the background color because I want to make sure I have some kind of graphic as well on the spine. And the spine is, of course, where you close the book, and that's what you see on the bookshelf. Make sure you guys position things accurately so that nothing is getting cut off of your book. And now what I'm going to do for my spine is I'm actually just going to go and copy these layers over, the text layers. So I'm going to hold down Alt and drag to duplicate that layer, and then I'm going to rotate it and place it in the spine. And on the spine I should have, of course, the author's name, and I'm gonna try to straighten it to the best of my ability here by just kind of rotating it. So in addition to the author's name, you will also have the book title, because that's what you see on the book cover. Because it was pretty big on the front cover, I'm just gonna take that same layer I just duplicated and just decrease the size so that it fits nicely within the spine. And then I'm gonna duplicate this layer as well with the title. I'm going to drag while holding down Alt to duplicate. And now I had applied some pretty significant effects, so I don't want the effects to be as noticeable on the spine. So for this layer that I duplicated, I'm actually just going to go to Object Effects, and I'm going to remove that outer glow and just maybe keep the drop shadow. And of course I'm going to decrease the size. I believe I had set this piece of text to 24 points, so I'm going to set this one to 24 points as well. And then once again, I'm just going to rotate it and try to align it as straight as possible onto the spine. And now this part is optional, but I do want to go and copy that glyph that I was using as a decorative element, so I'm going to hold down Alt to duplicate that as well, and I'm going to rotate that as well and place it in the middle. You can see it's a little dark. So while still maintaining the exact same symbol, I'm just gonna go and select maybe a lighter color to apply to it so that it's a little bit more noticeable on the spine. And now I'm gonna click W to preview, and that's looking pretty decent thus far. And I'm ready to start work on my back cover. So it's all coming together, as you guys can see. Alright then, so let's move on to our back cover then. For our back cover, we're actually going to go and duplicate some of the things that we have in our graphics and our background layers. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to duplicate this background layer by clicking on the horizontal bars in the layers panel. I'm going to select duplicate layer background color, and I'm going to drag that duplicate over to my back cover and align it and then resize it. And now I'm actually going to double click on where it says background color copy, and I'm just going to call this one back cover. This will just make it easier for me if I need to make edits down the road. I'm already done with the graphics and the typography layers for now, so I'm just going to go and lock those in place so I can just focus on my back cover layer. And this really depends on how complex you want to make the back cover. I want to use the same image of the clouds on my back cover, so I'm just going to drag out a frame and fill it with that image of the clouds and fit it. And once more, like I was doing before, I'm just gonna apply some different transparency effects so that I can blend it in with that color underneath it, and maybe lower the opacity as well, so that I still have the same style graphic throughout my front and back covers as well as the spine. And now you can see I actually worked up until the bleed, but I think I'm just going to align it to the margins for now. Normal margins, and okay. Now I'm ready to start going and adding the last things that I want on my back cover. On my back cover you typically have, of course, the barcode that the person would scan in order for you to buy the book, and then you would have some kind of reviews. So for the reviews, I'm actually going to use my frame tool. I'm going to drag out a frame, and then using my type tool, I'm going to click inside the frame. I'm going to select the font that I want to use, which is basically going to be the same one that I was using on this layer right over here, because I want to keep a consistent format. And I'm going to just insert some placeholder text because I'm not going to take the time to write out a fictional review. I'm going to add some quotations around the placeholder text, and then I might include a fictional publication that was reviewing it. So I used Abaya Times over here for the first review on the front cover, so maybe this one might be PHS Design Guru. And then to make it look even more official, I'm gonna italicize it again. You can see I'm just kind of laughing at this because it's meant to be silly. Don't take it too seriously. Okay. In the tutorial that I was referencing before I made this video tutorial, they had actually done a drop cap for the review. So if you want to create a subtle drop cap, you just kind of go and highlight the first letter, and then in your paragraph panel you just go and add a drop cap. So I see they're actually adding that quotation as a drop cap, which I don't want. So instead I'm just gonna highlight it and do it without the quotes so that I'm not seeing that drop cap. Okay, that looks a little bit more distinguished. I'm not sure why they're adding that quotation, but it's okay. You know what? I'm just gonna go for it. Quotation and all. And then I might want to include a second review, so I'm going to select that layer, that text layer once more, and I'm gonna duplicate it by holding down Alt and dragging. And now this is gonna be a second review. Now, if it's gonna be a second review, that drop cap might be a little bit excessive. I'm actually gonna go and fill it with more placeholder text and pretend that another publication reviewed this book and its latest edition. So you guys can make this up all you want. This one's gonna be Julian's Book Soup review. Alright, so this is what it looks like when I preview it. So now I'm ready to start my export process. Oh, actually I'm not ready to start my export process. I need to add the barcode. So I'm going to be looking for the barcode image that I provided for you guys on Canvas, and then I'll be exporting my final draft. For the barcode, I'm going to drag out a frame at the bottom right of my back cover, and I'm going to fill this frame with my example barcode and make sure that it fits to try to make it look as legitimate as possible. And just for kicks, I'm going to add a subtle black stroke around it and position it just like so. Possibly just make it just a little bit smaller. And that, my friends, is a book cover. There are some minor things that I'm looking at that do need to be corrected. Like, you can see some of the layers are not properly aligned. So if you're looking at it in preview mode and you see that some things are not properly aligned, this is the time to make changes before you export your final draft, as I'm doing right now. And once you are happy with your final design and you feel like you did justice to your book, you are ready to export it. So I'm done with this paperback book copy. I think it looks pretty decent and I don't want to spend any more of my life working on it. So I'm going to go to File, Export, and I'm going to make sure I have it set to Adobe PDF Print. I'm going to call it Book Cover, and I want to make sure that it's set to Pages and it's only that one page. In case you guys were working around with other settings or practicing things in other pages, just make sure it's just that one page for the front and back covers, and then you guys are going to just go and export your final draft, and that's what you'll be submitting to me on Canvas. So I hope that was helpful to you guys. I hope you guys learned something different on InDesign, and as always, I can't wait to see your own beautiful designs. So hit me up if you have any questions. Peace out.